Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. I'm your host, Scotty, and today we're doing an instant reaction to the news that Tata Martino is out at Inter Miami. I will quote Tom Bogert, who 50 minutes ago says, breaking, Tata Martino is out as Inter Miami manager. He decided to leave for personal reasons, sources add. Martino led Miami to a league record 74 regular season points, then lost in round one of the MLS playoffs to Atlanta United. Really, I just want to get your guys' opinion on everything. So tell me your thoughts in the chat. We'll talk about it as we get some more people in and get some comments, and I'll sort of go through my thoughts on this. But first of I want to say thank you to Tata Martino. There was a lot of good that he did at this club. Certainly, Inter Miami's in a place right now that we've never been at before. And he did have a quote that I felt was inappropriate coming off a playoff loss, but that was, I think, appropriate now that we talk about the offseason. And it's that it's amazing this club has come so far so that we can be disappointed with results like this. That's absolutely true. Inter Miami won the Supporter Shield this year. They broke the points record. There's never been a team in MLS that has done what Inter Miami did this season. And Tata Martino does deserve a lot of credit for that. He finishes at Inter Miami with 56.72% winning percentage. That is significantly better than what Phil Neville had and significantly better than what Xavi Alonso had. So Phil Neville was at 40%. And so this is a huge step up. But of course, we know that Tata Martino had a significant talent advantage over Phil Neville and Alonso and Javier Morales as well. So he did significantly better. He won us 2 trophies. We won the 2023 Leagues Cup in some of his first games at the club. And then, of course, this year we survived without some of that talent for a large portion of the season and still won a number of games in that period. And Tata Martino deserves a lot of credit for that. And we, as a result, won the Supporter Shield this year. The first thing I want to talk about is, was he a great candidate when we hired him? And I think you have to say he was. On paper, he's possibly the best candidate that Inter Miami could have possibly hired. He had won in MLS, won a trophy, won the MLS Cup in MLS with Atlanta. He had coached at Barcelona, coached the Argentine national team, had a great relationship with Messi. But ultimately, it wasn't as successful as we would have wanted once he got to Inter Miami. And I think that's ultimately what this came down to. Hash says it's the best for both sides. Sveteric says Xavi to Miami possible. Definitely we'll talk about potentially some candidates, and I hope you guys throw some ideas my way. Cynical Tube says, is it 100%? It absolutely is. He's stepping away now. Tom Bogert is saying that this was a personal decision based on Tata Martino and not a firing from the club. But you have to imagine if Inter Miami was desperate to have this guy back next year, he would still be back. It doesn't feel like there's anything that this club is going to let stand in their way from as much success as they can possibly have. So even though Tata Martino is stepping away, and that is the official line, you have to assume that Inter Miami is okay with this and is, sort of happy to bring in someone new moving forward. Brad says, managing Inter Miami is difficult. I get why he left. That's true. And the expectations of a club with this level of talent is certainly no joke. And again, Tata Martino does deserve credit for keeping the train on the tracks. He did, I think, a good job with this job. It's just a matter of, and we're going to talk about this more, what is the ambition for Inter Miami? Do they need their coaches to do a great job with this level of talent and when you have Lionel Messi on the team? And I don't think you can really argue that Tata Martino did a great job. That doesn't mean he wasn't solid, good, have positive reviews from his time at Inter Miami. But if your ambition is as high as it seems like Inter Miami's is, you can understand why they decided to move on. Cynical says, hoping this was Messi approved. It's 100% Messi approved. There's no way this happens without Messi's approval. And moving forward, he'll get his say for who the next manager will be. Messi TV says, managing the team would be really difficult because there's no time for failure. A lot of pressure for the incoming for the new manager. Absolutely, but that's the privilege of being able to coach Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez and these guys is you have to know you have this huge talent advantage. You don't get time to implement your new ideas or your, progressive styles or anything. You have to win right away. And being a trophy hunter is what this team is calling for. And then Hash says, hopefully we don't get a defensive-minded coach. I don't think that's going to happen. Again, any coach that we bring in is going to be in lockstep with what Lionel Messi wants to do. There's no doubt about that. Just, again, to wax a little lyrical about Tata Martino, I still think some of his accomplishments at Inter Miami went a little bit unspoken of, and I think he deserves credit for more than he has been given credit for. This team was really bad at defensive set pieces last year, and I think they became a competent team on defensively when it came to defending set pieces, and I give Tata Martino and his coaching staff a lot of credit for that. He also was hugely important in building this team. Guys like Julian Gressel, Diego Gomez, Toto Aviles, Facundo Farias, they wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for Tata Martino and his network of friends and assistants and everyone that he's met over the course of his career, helping guide him to find these players in Argentina or Paraguay to bring in and be impact players for Inter Miami. And so as we talk about the success of guys like Diego Gomez, you have to give Tata Martino credit for identifying him as a guy that Inter Miami has to go out and get. And that impact will still be felt moving forward with Federico Redondo and Aviles, and when Farias comes back, and some of the other younger guys that really developed under Tata Martino, like Noah Allen, we saw over the last month was hugely impactful. Benjamin Kramaski, I think, took positive steps. David Ruiz, I think, took positive steps. Ian Frey was lightning under Tata Martino, although I don't know how much we should give Tata Martino credit for Ian Frey, who's just a fireball. But yeah, so there's a lot to be happy about if you are looking back on Tata Martino and thinking he did a good job. But there's also a lot to feel grateful, feel happy about looking forward and thinking someone new could do an even better job. Wookie says, knew I could count on you to be live. Yeah, well, big news, right? It's fun to talk about. And I want to react with all you guys. I want to hear what you guys have to think. Hash says, Tata out means there will be a huge player turnover, especially with many players' contracts ending in the near future. We're going to talk about that too. Jay says, wow, that was fast. Not completely unexpected. I think what Tata said in his last press conference after the loss kind of hinted at it. Maybe. Can you imagine trying to design a defensive tactic with foraging stars plus the constant injuries? He did a good job regardless, but the playoff failure was on him. And then Jay says, Messi definitely gave his blessing. Going to be another interesting offseason. Absolutely an interesting offseason. So this is where it went wrong, I think, for Tata Martino. Some of the smaller things, I think he did show a little bit too much favoritism with this team on occasion. But this is something that many coaches have, so I don't want to crucify him for this. But I think he was a little too loyal to Julian Gressel for large parts of the season, and then sort of lost that loyalty at the end in a strange way. Federico Redondo, another player that seemingly was given every opportunity to impress, even though Inter Miami had more impactful midfielders playing for them week in and week out. It felt like Redondo was able to get in on a consistent basis. And we talked about this a lot, but Cello Wiegand versus Ian Frey as a right back. Tata Martino went to Cello Wiegand every single time Cello could go. And so that one was always something that was a little strange to me, but there's also potentially other guys that maybe I was approving of. Drake Callender there was never a doubt that Drake Callender was going to be the starting goalkeeper. I don't think there ever should have been a doubt, but it goes both ways. So I don't want to blame him too much for that. I also thought he sometimes struggled to get the best out of our mid-level players, or not mid-level, but the veterans, but not superstar players. And I'm talking about guys like Julian Gressel, Matthias Rojas, Drake Callender, Franco Negri, Sergei Christoph, certainly, potentially Cello Wiegand, although I'm not exactly sure what his ceiling is. But it did feel like there were times where he didn't get the best out of those types of players. Now, on the flip side, he did get the best out of Robert Taylor last year. But I think there's a good argument that he didn't always put guys in the best position to succeed. Again, very difficult considering the requirements that this roster has. Obviously, Lionel Messi has to play in his preferred position because he's the best player in the world. But that does make it difficult to work in some of these other players, like specifically Rojas and Julian Gressel, when that's also probably their best position. But to me, the biggest factors were the inability to win and compete at the highest level in our 3 tournaments that we played this year. Inter Miami didn't just not win any of these 3 tournaments, and those 3 being the CONCACAF Champions Cup, the Leagues Cup, and the MLS Cup. He didn't even progress particularly far. Obviously, in the MLS Cup, we lose in the first round to Atlanta in a best-of-3 series against a team that we outpaced in the regular season by 34 points. There's really no excuse for that. Although, with that said, I'm not sure how much I blame him specifically for these 2 losses that we had against Atlanta. You can definitely second guess playing David Martinez over Noah Allen or going to a back 4 when you've been playing with a back 3. Those are fair criticisms, but to me, the more egregious coaching moments were earlier in the season when we lost at Columbus and when we lost at Monterrey in the games that cost us the Leagues Cup and the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And based on how Monterrey and Columbus did in those respective tournaments, you have to assume that if we were able to compete with them and beat them, we had a very good chance to win those tournaments. We were beaten by some of the best teams in those tournaments, not, like the MLS playoffs where we lost to an Atlanta team that really is unlikely to make a run for the MLS Cup. Specifically at Columbus, and I think that game was on August 2nd, if I'm remembering correctly, although I guess I can just look it up real quick. August 13th, we lose 3-2 at Columbus. And this is a game that Inter Miami was in control of. They were winning 2-0 after 61 minutes, I think is when Diego Gomez scored the second goal. Inter Miami had all the momentum. That Columbus crowd was out of it. And then there were some substitutes from Wilfred Nancy, and they just took control of that game and scored 3 straight on us. And Tata Martino did almost nothing to stymie the flow of momentum. He did nothing to regain the initiative until the final 5 minutes of that game. And ultimately, we lose because Tata Martino was unable to impact that game from the sidelines in a positive way. And then furthermore, that Monterrey game on the road, I thought was one of the worst coaching jobs I've ever seen. He went with his starting lineup knowing he needed to overturn a 2-1 deficit, which means he knew he should have known that he needed to score 2 or 3 goals in that game to actually win it. And the offense at no point ever looked like it was going to do that. They looked poor, and worse than that, Tata Martino did almost nothing to change that game. He made no substitutions, but worse than that, and that's bad enough in an elimination game. He did nothing to change the setup for a team that was clearly not going to score multiple goals in that game. He never did anything to try and switch up what the team was doing. Skrilla says Tata Martino did a lot for this team, and I think that's absolutely true. And I want to make a big point about this team's ambition, and I will in a few minutes. But again, guys, keep the comments coming because I want to hear from you guys. I want to know what you guys are thinking about this. Jay says Jordy still has a good engine. Messi was never a defensive element on any team, but yeah, Suarez and Boosie are not helping defense. I don't think that fixing the defense is what Inter Miami is going to try and do this offseason. I mean, they could bring in more defenders, but I don't think they're going to orient the whole team towards becoming a strong defensive team for next year. They're going to bring in a new coach and some new talent, and then they're going to try and dominate games with incredible offensive talent and solid midfield play and a defense that can hopefully prevent some goals. Messi TV says, I actually think Messi isn't the one behind most signings and coach, but rather Inter Miami as a team brought them to please Messi because I don't really think Messi cares about it much, honestly. We'll come back to that one too. Who knows the MLS more than Tata, and who's going to coach the star players the right way? We'll talk about who could be a coaching replacement in a few minutes. Don't think loyalty to Gressel was any issue. Team losses that really hurt when Gressel was not on the pitch. Gressel didn't see any time during the playoffs, which was really odd. Yeah, I'm just trying to think more holistically because there was a lot of games early in the season where Gressel started game after game after game after game. When even guys like even Messi and Busquets and Suarez were getting rest, Gressel played every single game. And I think Gressel's a good player. I just never thought that Tata Martino was able to get the best out of him. And so to continue playing him in a way that wasn't appropriate for Julian Gressel, I thought was a little tough, but it is what it is. Thomas says people blaming Tata, but next season's going to be worse with the 4 stars aging, and they want to bring Neymar, so 3 people up front not defending. Patrick says, I knew Tata was a problem at the CCC and Leagues Cup. Those were fully coaches' errors. No subs in Monterrey, no subs in Columbus. The stubbornness to adapt to the type of players he had. Well put, Patrick. I definitely think that's a huge aspect to it. In 2 of the biggest games of the season, I thought coaching errors really screwed up Inter Miami and in-game coaching decisions. So it's one thing to put together good game plans, and I think he did do that on a number of occasions. I think that Columbus game at Chase Stadium was a huge example of that, but in the biggest games, he wasn't able to make mid-game adjustments, and I think that really hurt Inter Miami. Gabriella says, I'm curious to see how this can impact the roster. Kind of nervous, but I expected it. Cynical says, Messi has a game tonight, so he isn't accepting interviews till next week. Well, I would expect the next coach to I would expect Inter Miami and Messi to already have an idea of who they would be happy with for the next coach, if I'm being honest. Wilkie says, I was surprised too. Fabricio said, personal issues with Inter Miami. Curious what those might be. Before I went live, I was reading from Tom Bogart, who mentioned that Jordi Alba and Tata Martino had an argument in practice over the final days leading up to that last Atlanta game. I have no idea if that's related. I don't want to report that as related. I'm only telling you what Tom Bogart said in his video that he did as soon as he reported this. But yeah, that is something that he said. Patrick says, I told folks Tata would cost us in the playoffs. Can't even brag about how right I was because it's depressing. Yep. A lot of people happy, but who will coach this team better with players who are getting older? El Bigote says 2 things that could mean. Either he was asked to leave due to his lack of performance in meaningful moments, or that things are shaping up badly for next season, so he asked to leave. Interesting point. Hash says the thing is some players are huge howlers in important games that lead to IMCF losing regardless of Tata, such as Calendar and Avilas. I wouldn't go that far. Do you guys really think Xavi will do better than Tata? Patrick says, the fact that the whole league knew how to play against Inter Miami and the solution worked is disgraceful. Losing in a 3-game series to a horrible team is definitely fireable. There was a plan B and surely a C just in case. Did not feel that way against Monterrey and in many cases against Columbus. Hash says, where's Mike V, Tata out advocate when you need him? I actually asked Mike if he wanted to be on the podcast, but I guess he's at work right now. Okay, back to it. One of the things I talked about since the loss, and I did it with Battered Herons guys. I did it on here. Me and Sor talked about it. Me and Mike talked about it. I talked about it with Danny and Chris. What is the level of ambition for this team from the ownership and from Messi? Clearly, building this team around Lionel Messi is hugely important to everyone at the club. And I don't think that's a problem. But you have to make sure Messi wants to win everything, or it's hard for fans to get behind winning everything if that's not the dedicated commitment of everyone at the club. And so my biggest question was, does Messi's team really care about winning every trophy, or do they just want to be successful and set a legacy and rack up goals and have a great time in MLS? And not that any of those things will be wrong or bad, but as an Inter Miami fan, you just want it to be winning everything. I think this is a step towards showing us that Inter Miami and Messi are both committed to winning everything. And then going to the ownership, same question. Do you want to be the most famous club in the MLS, or do you want to win every trophy? Do you want to win some trophies and have fun seasons and have people talk about Inter Miami all over the world and wear the Messi kit and have pink jerseys in every stadium and all that? Or do you want to win every trophy? And so that to me was one of the biggest questions going into this offseason. I thought our first taste of that might come with the roster decisions we will get in the next week or so. But it turns out we might be getting that first clue now with Tata Martino leaving. Again, as I've said, and I started this episode with, Tata Martino did a lot of really good things at Inter Miami, but did he do an excellent job? I think it's hard to say that he did a excellent job. And so if you're Inter Miami, is good enough? You have Lionel Messi for a very short period of time. You have this window to be excellent. And if you're only good in that window, that's that might not be good enough for them, and they're going to look for someone that can potentially bring them to excellent. Are they going to find them? I don't know, but I admire them for taking the shot and saying, I think we can get even better, and we're going to work our butts off to figure out what that might be. And so Tata Martino, the first domino to fall. I think this is Inter Miami admitting this is probably not a successful season. And so Tata Martino gets the axe. And that is how it works sometimes. And again, that's not to say Tata Martino was all bad or he didn't have a ton of success here. He brought us our first 2 trophies. And I think all Inter Miami fans should be grateful for what he did. But if you want to go from good to great or good to excellent or good to perfect, I think this was taking a shot at this was really important. And I'm interested to see what this means moving forward. But just this idea of thinking good is not good enough. We have to be the best at everything. I admire the ambition. And to me, as a fan, that makes me really excited. Jay says, who is on your short list for coach? Well, we'll talk about it, but I want some ideas from you guys because, you know, if you're at the top of the world, you're at Barcelona or Manchester United or Real Madrid or whatever, you can sort of look at the 5 or so brightest prospects in the world or brightest coaches in the world and think, oh, which one of those might be available? But when you're at this level, it's very difficult because there are hundreds of coaches that could potentially be a good fit. But then how many of those are Spanish speaking? How many of those might have a relationship with Messi? I don't know. That's a lot harder. So you guys give me your list of people you would be interested in or who you think might have a good connection. I will also say, I don't think that whoever is the next coach has to have a pre-existing relationship with Messi. I think it's possible that all they have to do is be someone that's caught Messi's eye. So even if they haven't worked directly with Messi, it could just be someone that Messi feels like would be an interesting coach to work with. And maybe they never work directly together, but that would be something I would keep an eye on. AZ says it's probably going to be Xavi, but his favorite choice would be Zidane. So Zidane, perfect example. I have no idea if this is realistic or not. So I would actually assume it's probably not. But Zidane at Real Madrid won everything, right? That could be someone that Messi has always thought, oh, that would be a fun coach to play for and play with. And he speaks Spanish and has an understanding of the culture and probably has a huge pull in terms of bringing players to the team, which is something that I think that they're going to look for from the front office. I think who will as well. Wookie says, no, Xavi should not be considered, not the right fit, and doubt he'd be interested in anyways. Listen, Xavi feels like the most obvious name to talk about. I've said this before. I'm not a Barcelona fan, so I didn't watch his time at Barcelona. I certainly didn't watch his time in Qatar or the UAE or wherever he was before that. So I have no idea what he's like as a coach. And so I have no opinion on if he's the right coach or not. If Inter Miami starts making progress with him, I'll obviously do some more research so we can have an educated conversation about him. But it feels like a lot of fans who do watch him a lot didn't love his time at Barcelona. LB Gote says start of Iniesta's coaching career coming next season. Yeah, maybe he'll come out of retirement and be a player coach. We'll see. Xavi will be interested in the Moss brothers have it, deep pockets. That, again, goes to my conversation about ambition. This team is clearly willing to spend money, and by spending money, they've made a lot of money in return. And they've been rewarded with huge prizes, including the Club World Cup, where they're going to make another $50 million. So cash flow into this team should not be a problem. And on the coaching staff, you can spend more money than you could if you're only talking about players who have all of the roster rules attached to them. I still think the Inter Miami might drop a big bag on a player this offseason just to, again, demonstrate their ambition. But if you're going to do that on the coach instead, that would be an interesting approach. John says, who really will coach this team if the Stars got the power? Well, I think the biggest flaw with Tata Martino was his ability to impact games during the game. And so I don't think it's about taking Messi off the field or not putting him in the position he likes to be. It's just a matter of understanding when, new subs have to come in to change the flow of the midfield, or when you have to make a defensive sub to lock things down, or if you need to make an attacking sub to sort of put the opposition team on the defensive to take away some of their attacking impetus and force them to make new moves to pull out of what they were trying to do. Like that tug and war, pull and tug of in-game management, I think is where Tata Martino struggled the most. And it's the reason why in knockout tournaments where you get one life, or even in the MLS Cup where you get two in the first round, he was sort of unable to do that. A lot of Iniesta calls. Iniesta doesn't have the coaching degree yet. Well, this is interesting because I think the coaching degrees you need in the MLS are going to be different than you would need in Europe, just for the record. Abigote says they want the loudest thing to help with the bottom dollar, so when they sell it's expensive. I think that's about the club, and I think they're probably just going to sell the club to Messi, if I'm being honest with you, if they ever do that. Hash says, what is the roster decision that will be announced next week? So every MLS club has to make their roster decisions for options and contract years, and if they're going to activate loan purchases by November 27th, which is in 8 days. Every team has to do this except for the teams that are in the semifinals. They get an extension, but a lot of teams have already done this. If you go out and research, I think St. Louis City was the first one to do it, and they did it weeks ago. But I think Inter Miami was caught off guard by how early they exited this tournament. So I don't think they were really ready to make those decisions when they were forced to. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but that's why we haven't seen those yet. And it could come in any day. It's not that they have to come on the 27th. It's just that they have to come by the 27th. So Inter Miami has a ton of players, and maybe I can bring up this list real quick. Inter Miami has a ton of players that are potentially out of contract. Obviously, Luis Suarez and Oscar Ustari out of contract, but Chelo Wiegand has an option. Franco Negri has an option. Sergei Kristoff has an option. Jordi Alba has an option. Matias Rojas, Cedro Santos. So is Inter Miami going to activate those options to keep those guys under contract? Are they going to let them move on? I think they would demonstrate. I think it's going to demonstrate the ambition of this team. And I keep coming back to this word ambition, but I think this is the hot topic for Inter Miami right now, especially as Tata Martino gets fired. Jordi Alba is under contract next year if Inter Miami activates his option. But is that option going to make him a DP? Is Inter Miami going to be able to make him a DP? I don't know. That'll be interesting. Sergei Kristoff, you'd imagine, wouldn't be activated. But Chelo Wiegand, are they going to buy Chelo Wiegand, who's going to drastically improve, or not improve, but he'll cost more against the cap because you have to amortize his purchase fee for next year? Or is Inter Miami thinking we can go out and get a better right back if we have the entire winter to do that? That's an interesting conversation. Matias Rojas, who knows what his financials are going to look like, but he's a player that they could let walk this off season, or they could keep. One of the things I want to talk about is the players that are most likely to be affected by this, and I will after I get through some more of your comments. But that's what the roster decisions are. That's going to come over the next 8 days. Iniesta is doing his coaching degree in UAE right now. Jay says Messi is looking at his legacy. He doesn't want to finish as part of an also-ran team in MLS. Nothing less than MLS championship and competing in other tournaments, at least semifinals minimum. Yeah, I hope that's the case. And I have no reason to think it's not. It's just they have this moment to prove themselves and their ambition, and I think this is a big move towards proving that. Hash says it's most likely Xavi. Francisco says if Tata is out, they have already contacted various coaches some time ago also. I agree with this. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I have always thought that I've always thought that Lionel Messi and his team have coaches that they think would be good fits for Inter Miami. And they have been working with the Moss brothers and working with Raul Sanyehi to sort of make sure they're never caught off guard. So I think they've already put a feeler out there. I think they already know who their top guy is and who their second and third top guys are. And I think they are going to go get their man. I don't think it'll be that long before we start hearing who it might be. AZ says need Hansi Flick on this team. Yeah. Talk about opening the wallets and getting a big splash hire. Xavi would be 100% a good connection. Maybe, again, I haven't been incredibly involved in following Xavi's career. Jay says, I don't think they're selling anytime soon. The value of this team hasn't plateaued. Ownership still has the resources to grow the team under current league salary restrictions. They've made a ton of money. They've made a ton of money over the last years. I think selling the team is actually just selling a stake to Inter Miami. I'm sorry, to Lionel Messi. I would be surprised if the four owners, the two Moss brothers, David Beckham and Messi, aren't the long-term owners of Inter Miami. That's just my feeling. Francisco says, a coach that doesn't ask Messi to work on defense, be willing to defend with one less player. Well, possibly two or three, because you're also talking about Suarez and potentially, a Neymar or some other big name aging veteran. But listen, this team can do that in this league. This isn't the Premier League. This isn't Ligue 1. This isn't La Liga, where maybe La Liga is a little different, but you don't have to defend with 10 guys in this league to be competent. We've seen this team when everyone's healthy and you get your best lineup, you can do it without Messi and Suarez being an active part of the defense. But you need your midfielders to be defensively sound. They have to be smart. They have to be well positioned. You need your center backs to be able to defend in one-on-one situations. And you need your fullbacks to be, responsible defensively. And you need your goalkeeper to be a good shot stopper. So it is possible. It's just can Inter Miami do that right and find the ways to get the best out of their players and bring in new players that are even a step up. Tony says, ironically, Tata's best was in the summer without Messi, and Suarez, his worst was with those two. Yeah, listen, I think there is an irony to Tata Martino's best coaching job coming when he has the least resources available to him. I think when Inter Miami was at its most vulnerable, had some injuries, had some departures for international duty, that's when we saw Tata at his absolute best. So I think there is something to be said about that. What does that actually mean? I don't know, because Inter Miami's best games were with Messi. Thinking about that game versus the New York Red Bulls when we won 6-2, beating New England recently by a big margin, beating Orlando City early in the season 5-0. So this team at its absolute best obviously had those guys, but you're right. Tata Martino at his best probably was without those two, but only because without those two, he was going to get more credit for success. Justin says, are we going to bring in a coach who's got no experience and they don't know anything about the MLS and is going to go bad next year? I don't know. Like I said, I think Inter Miami has a good idea of who their next coach will be, but I genuinely don't. Jay says, if they look for the best in MLS, it's Wilfred Nancy. I'd really like to see what Nancy can do with this roster. It's not going to be Wilfred Nancy. Wilfred Nancy is a style coach, and maybe I should get to my next point. He's a style coach, and that's not what Inter Miami is going to bring in. They need a coach that can adapt to what's on this roster with Messi and Suarez and Busquets and Alba. There's no way you're going to play this 3-4-2-1 that Wilfred Nancy has made so well, and you'd have to build into over the course of 3 seasons. I think he's a great coach. I think he's probably the best coach in MLS, but I think you're more looking at a guy like Jim Curtin who can get the best out of his players, find a formation that works, and make it work. Not that it will be Jim Curtin, just his style of coach. I think it's going to be someone who speaks Spanish, potentially Argentinian, and that Messi and co feel good about. Certainly that won't be Jim Curtin, but I think it'll be a coach like that who is able to get the most out of his players in a way that Wilfred Nancy, I think, is more system oriented. Messi TV says Iniesta and Xavi aren't coming. Let's be real. Maybe. I'll be honest. I have no idea. If you were the coach, how will you deal with players' contracts? Who will you let go and who to stay? Well, let me just pull up the roster real quick. It's a fun little game. I think if you can bring back Luis Suarez for a TAM deal like he was this year, I think you do it. I would love to keep Campana. I think those two make an extraordinary tandem up top. You're going to lose you're going to lose Diego Gomez, but you replace him with Facundo Farias. I think you trade Robert Taylor. I think you trade Julian Gressel. I think you let Sergei Kristoff walk. You let Nicholas Freder walk. I think they're going to do both of those. I think I would let Cello Wiegand walk. And so that means I'm good at striker with Campana and Suarez. I probably need a left winger or two, really just one, if you move Robert Taylor. So you'll have Messi, you'll have Matias Rojas, you'll have Facundo Farias, you'll have Leo Alfonso as sort of a depth option. And then if if you can sign, let's just say a Neymar, but a Di Maria or any really big money or big name left winger, I think that would be an excellent signing. In the midfield, you'll still have Busquets, Redondo, Yannick Bright, Kramaski, David Ruiz, Lawson Sunderland. You feel good about that. Jordi Alba and Noah Allen on the left, so probably letting Franco Negri go. David Martinez, Toto Aviles, and I think you need to bring in 2 center backs. And then at right back, I think you need to bring in 2 right backs. And then I'm okay with Drake Callender. I think if you have an opportunity to bring in an upgrade on Drake Callender, maybe like a huge upgrade, maybe you do it. But he's just such a valuable player that I think I would keep him. Fairtex says, Xavi could be possible. You never know. Wookie says, maybe I should know this, but was he fired or did he resign? Although management wanted him to stay. So if you're talking about Tata Martino, it is being reported that he resigned. But again, I don't think this happens if Inter Miami is trying to keep him to stay. I think if they really wanted him to stay, he would stay. Thomas says, you don't have to defend, but 3 players not defending is not winning championship tournaments. It's an interesting conversation. It really is. I think it's possible, but if someone's going to argue with me that it's not, I think there's valid reasons to think that. Justin says, you're right about the league, but if 3 players up front only walking, I'm sorry, only teams can take advantage. It doesn't matter about what's the league. Imagine Xavi being manager here, his connections. Just imagine Rafinha coming here. That I don't think is particularly realistic. I think over the last 7 months, or really, since the summer, I think Inter Miami's had a little bit of a reality check, or at least I've had a little bit of a reality check about what's possible in terms of roster building for this team. Rafael Varane and Angel Di Maria and now Neymar, lots of guys that have been sort of ancillarily connected to Inter Miami that I'm not sure are particularly interested in the MLS. So we'll see. Couple other points I wanted to bring up before I sort of leave off. And again, I want to hear from you guys. So tell me what you got in the chat. What does the next coach need to be? First of all, he needs to speak Spanish. There's no doubt about that. And then I want to see him a coach that is not system-based, but is player-based. I think that's going to be a must for this team. So I talked about Wilfred Nancy. I don't think that type of coach is going to be what Inter Miami goes for. But the biggest thing we need to upgrade on is the ability to make timely substitutions and affect games from the sideline in game. And I know it's hard. I know that sometimes you get it wrong, but it's the indecision from Tata Martino that I think drives me crazy and cost us a couple big games. And again, one of the things that Tata Martino did really well was building this team, finding guys like Diego Gomez and finding guys like Federico Redondo and some others, Toto Aviles, to bring into this team, Julian Gressel, that are hugely important players. And so what happens when he's not here and you no longer have access to his network of connections? I know a lot of people have talked about moving him to the front office, which would be, that would be an incredible move, but I don't know if it doesn't sound like that's possible, but that would be an incredible move. So whoever it is, I'm interested to see what their connection to players looks like. The team did bring in Raul Sanyehi to try and buff up what this team's scouting department might look like and what this team's player outreach department might look like. So I don't know how strong that's become under Sanyehi over the last couple months, but certainly if you're going out to identify and recruit players, you need someone to spearhead that. And I think Tata Martino was the spearhead for a lot of those conversations. So that will have to be replaced. And you have someone in place in Sanyehi to do that, but I don't know how effective they'll be. And so bringing in a new coach that has connections and can recruit players will be important. And that's something you're going to want to see. And so a lot of these names, Xavi and Zidane and all of these guys will have connections to players, right? And then the last thing I want to talk about is what does this mean for a lot of players on the team? But first I want to go through a couple more chats. The reason why Xavi isn't coming is Messi and Tata both have a relationship. Imagine how Tata feels if Xavi comes. He actually thinks Messi is behind it. Reason why I said Messi isn't behind the transfer. Oh, Messi's 100% behind this, no doubt. Possibly a La Liga coach, hopefully Zidane and Xavi. I'll be interested to see what type of names come out over the next couple of days because Just like Inter Miami's connected to seemingly every big free agent, I imagine they'll be connected to every big free agent coach over the next couple of days. Francisco says Miami has a coach secured. That coach has to have a word in the roster decisions that are going to be made this month. Excellent point. Okay, so lastly, what does this mean for the team and for guys that may or may not be back? First of all, I want to talk about Robert Taylor, because this is a guy that disappeared over the last month. Basically, he didn't play on the field at the same time as Messi for the last 2 months of the season, and not in the playoffs either, aside from maybe 5 minutes or so while subs were coming in and out. But it felt like almost every time he started, it was because Messi was coming off the bench. And as soon as Messi came onto the field, Robert Taylor left. So I think he's still going to be gone, but which was my prediction when we did our offseason primer last week. Because I think the team, Messi and Jordi Alba and the front office, are okay with Robert Taylor not being a part of this. But maybe it was a Tata Martino decision. And so I think this breathes new life into the potential future for Robert Taylor at Inter Miami. That I think is really interesting. Julian Gressel is Tata's guy. He drafted Julian Gressel out of, I'm not sure which college he went to, but he drafted Julian Gressel when he was at Atlanta and helped groom him into one of the best players in the MLS, one of the MLS all-star type players. And obviously was huge in recruiting him to Inter Miami, gave him a ton of starts, a ton of opportunities over the last couple of years. Over the last year. We talked about this on the podcast last week. Is there a way you can keep both Julian Gressel and Matías Rojas on the roster moving forward? Because obviously both have a fit as the backup to Messi when Messi needs a rest or he's on international duty or anything like that. But having both of them as guys that can play as sort of a backup right winger and help you in the midfield, but are more offensive minded and are more, creators. I know Rojas has a little bit of goal scoring threat to him, but they feel like they occupy at their best the same positions, the same spots on the field. And so I wonder how they can coexist on this roster. And now that Tata Martino is not here, I wonder if Julian Gressel might be looking to move on, or the team might be looking to move on Julian Gressel. He is making more money than Matías Rojas. I actually would think I'd rather keep Gressel from a player talent perspective and sort of his fit on the team, but Rojas will be making less money. So I wonder if they're going to go with Rojas instead of Gressel. It's just something to consider. And then on the flip side, Matías Rojas, a guy that I think Tata went out and identified and brought in, and very talented player, but he is 29. Maybe you can trade him to someone else in the league and get a lot of value back, just like we saw with Kamal Miller last year. Maybe not someone on your board you'd expect to get traded, but you get so much value back that you have to do the deal. I don't know. It's very interesting. Sergei Kristov, another player that clearly didn't fit what Inter Miami wanted to do with Messi and in this new era. They brought him in before the 2023 season. He was their best center back at the beginning of that year. I thought he was a solid player. Once they traded for Kamal Miller, I thought the two of them partnered fine. I think there is some talent in Sergei Kristov. I just don't think stylistically he fits what Inter Miami wants to do. But maybe with the new coach, there's a new style. Maybe Kristov does fit in. I don't expect it. I still think he'll be gone, but someone to keep an eye on. And then to me, the biggest one is Chelo Wiegand. Tata Martino gave this guy every chance, even though in my head, Ian Frey outplayed him every chance he got. Chelo Wiegand still went in whenever he was available. So, maybe Tata really had a great relationship with Chelo. Maybe he felt Chelo was the perfect piece. And so now if you get a new coach, maybe the team doesn't want to bring back Chelo and decides we can actually get a better right back instead with those same resources. It'll be interesting. But to me, those are the 5 players just off the top of my head that I think are most likely to be impacted by this. Is Inter Miami going to have a 2-striker setup next year? Does this make it more likely that both Campana and Suarez stay? Right? That's not something we really ever saw under Tata, but maybe it's something that a new coach will bring. That feels like something you'd want to be a part of. Federico Redondo, another guy who Tata has basically made a locked-in starter every time he's been healthy and ready to go. Lawson Sunderland is a guy that Tata Martino gave his debut to. So Maybe a new coach doesn't see as much value in Lost to Sunderland. Maybe he's a guy that moves on. I'm not sure about that. Noah Allen playing as a center back. Maybe a new coach just says Noah Allen can't be a center back at that size. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with some of the young guys as well. David Martinez, he's going to be here up until next summer, but does this make it less likely that he's here long term? I think if Tata's here, Tata identified this as the guy he wanted. Obviously, if David Martinez and Tata are together, you think Tata's going to stick with him. But if not, who knows what happens with David Martinez? So there's a lot of guys, maybe Drake Callender too. I'm not sure. But there's a lot of guys that could be impacted by this. So I think that's really interesting. Guys, do me a favor, by the way, hit the like button, because if you do, Inter Miami will get a great coach in return, and that would be awesome. Message TV says, I think Nancy is a good coach and will find success with this team. Good coaches know how to adjust to what they have with them. Yeah, but it's very dangerous. One of the things we've talked about in this episode is the ambition of this team. And the reason you have to have the highest ambition is because you only have a limited window to get the most out of the Messi era. And I think it's really risky to bring in a coach who's always had success because he's built teams into his system, and then to try and say you just turn into what Messi and co need. I think that's very difficult. The Real Keno says, Wiegand, Aviles, Martinez, and also Callender are going to be traded or sold to focus on defense. Possible. All guys that Inter Miami should be looking at. I don't think David Martinez can be sold because he's on loan. But Aviles could be a guy. Wiegand, again, also on loan, but I guess they could buy him and then trade him. And then Callender, Aviles. I don't think Inter Miami should be comfortable with anyone on this roster staying on this roster except for the Barcelona guys, because just like we saw last year with Kamal Miller, they're going to do what they have to do to make this team as good as possible. And while I appreciate that, sometimes that means losing some of your favorite players. Is there a deadline for a new coach? I don't know. Someone mentioned that you'd want the new coach to be a part of decision-making. And I also think that there's a good chance Inter Miami has already someone in mind that they will want to replace Tata with. But I don't know if there's a deadline. You'd imagine by, I don't know, 8 days feels like a short amount of time, but we'll see. I think that will come out over the next couple of days. Tati says Tata resigned. He wasn't fired. Yes, but also I think if Inter Miami was desperate to have him back, he would be back. That's just my opinion. I don't have any insider information. I get the sense that if Inter Miami was incredibly confident that Tata was the right guy, they would do what it takes to keep him, and they would alleviate any of his concerns. So maybe he does have a few questions or concerns, but I think Inter Miami is okay with him moving on. Just my opinion. Vice City says, Crazy Taylor got no minutes in the playoffs when we won the Leagues Cup with him starting every game, basically. Yeah. Some of the subs, there were some weird decisions down the tube there, especially in the playoffs. No Julian Gressel, no Robert Taylor. It was strange. Vice City Lucas says, I think half this roster is gone. Well, at least 40%. And that's being modest. I feel like it will be 30%. Listen, Inter Miami has replaced half its roster basically every year of its existence. I think they're averaging like 8.5 new guys in every single season. Just this past year, Suarez, Gressel, Frede, Redondo, Wiegand, Matias Rojas, David Martinez, Bright, and Leo Alfonso, the draft picks, had an impact. So they're going to do it. And guys that left the team, right? Joseph Martinez, Dixon Arroyo, Victor Ulloa, Kamal Miller, Stefanelli, Chris McVeigh, Gregory, DeAndre Yedlin, John Mota. So 8 guys in, 8 guys out is what Inter Miami has traditionally done. And I think if we were keeping Tata Martino, you would say there's a lot of guys in this team that Tata Martino likes. So maybe that makes it less likely that you're going to move them moving forward. But now that you're getting a new coach, now that Atlanta's hired a general manager, so I'm not sure Chris Henderson's going to leave. We'll see. It could be another busy offseason. And listen, Inter Miami has had an incredible, obviously, transfer window in the summer of 2023 when they brought in Messi and Suarez, and not Suarez, Alba, Busquets, Diego Gomez, etc. They followed up with another big one last winter with Julian Gressel and Suarez and Redondo. So they are fully capable of having a big transfer window if that's what they are sort of trying to do. Manoj says Gressel needs to be replaced. That to me is the biggest and most interesting name to watch because he's a Tata guy. And unlike a lot of these other players who are from Argentina or, whatever, he doesn't have that connection to Messi and co. So Julian Gressel, to me, is the most interesting name to watch. And I think it would be a shame because I like Gressel, but I think that's the most interesting name to watch after today. Patrick says, yeah, Inter Miami had the deepest roster in the league, yet Tata never played folks, running players into the ground, playing them 90 minutes. Some players' bad form could be attributed to not playing. Yeah, I'm sure we'll spend more time talking about some of the biggest player or some of the, things Tata could have done better or the next coach should do better. But yeah, there was a lot of games where he didn't use his full complement of substitutes. Fraud says, what? So soon? I thought Tata would get maybe a preseason or a quarter season to redeem himself. I think the thing is, if you're Inter Miami, you can't waste time. You have to decide if Tata Martino is the right guy or not. And because of what he did this year, and he got a year and a half, it's not like he was only here for 3 months. Because of what he did this year, I think they had the information to decide, is he going to get better? Is he going to be better next year or not? And again, he's in his 60s. He's not a developing coach that's going to learn from this and get better. He is who he is at this point. Mano says Pep Guardiola. Now that would be fun. Wookie says, I'm excited about getting a new coach. It's needed. Tata was not bad, but the same issues would continue next season. He's simply not a playoff coach. I think that's really well worded, really well said. I think that's really how I feel. He's a good coach. He did some really good things, but Inter Miami needs a little bit better at this moment. And I don't think Tata Martino is going to become that. David Beckham would be a great coach. I don't think that's in Beckham's DNA. Hopefully Miami forms a better defense, and with this training program that was reported that the players will undertake, pretty sure IMCF might become America's Barcelona. Would be fun. That would be a lot of fun. Ran players into the ground for no good reason, while solid players got little playing time and benefited no one. Yeah, listen, Cello Wiegand, I think, is 2,800 minutes, and he came into the season late. Jordi Alba played a ton of minutes. Tota Avios played a ton of minutes. Sergio Busquets played a ton of minutes. You do wonder if the number of minutes Busquets played in the season had an impact on his health in the finals or in the playoffs. He played more minutes than anyone aside from Drake Callender, and Busquets is 36 or so. David Beckham has a close relationship with Zidane, so it's possible. He does. Yes, but many of them injured during the year, so the depth doesn't matter. Well, because they were injured, we were able to continue being competitive. And listen, we had a ton of injuries in that game, in that series against Monterrey, no doubt about it. But Inter Miami still had the talent to go out and win if they wanted to. Or not if they wanted to, but if they were, had things go their way, they could have won both that series and against Columbus. There was never a problem for talent, even though they had injuries. Pepe ain't coming here anytime soon. I think that's probably right. I think he's getting ready to sign a new contract with Manchester City. So you can put that one aside for another year or two. Okay, guys, I wanted to do an emergency live stream, and I wanted to hear from you guys specifically because, I think your opinions are just as interesting. And those are some of my thoughts. I'm sure Sora and I will be back tomorrow night or potentially Thursday to talk more in depth about this. But I wanted to get something out, hear from you guys, and get my thoughts out there. So I appreciate you guys joining me, getting in the chat, and being a part of this. Do me a favor, hit the like button one last time. But other than that, hope you guys have a wonderful day. And I'm very curious to see what Inter Miami does from here. And those roster decisions, I think, will be really interesting. All right, guys. See you next time. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.